The original Penn Station, built in 1910, was a masterpiece of Bow Arts architecture, grand, elegant, and a symbol of the city's power. But by the 1960s, it had become outdated in the eyes of city planners. They decided it was time for a change, paving the way for the construction of the Madison Square Garden and a more modern underground transit hub. Can you believe they demolished one of the most beautiful buildings in the city for a sports arena? The public outcry was swift and fierce. It wasn't just about the building, it was about the loss of a cultural treasure that had shaped New York's identity. The demolition sparked a massive debate on preserving historical landmarks versus the drive for urban renewal. In the aftermath, the wrecking of Penn Station became one of the most controversial decisions in urban history. It even led to the creation of the Landmark Preservation Act in 1965, which made it harder to demolish historic buildings in New York. Was it all worth it? Today, Penn Station is a shadow of its former self, underground, cramped, and lacking the grandeur that made it iconic. Some would argue that New York's loss is still felt in the city's skyline today. Can you imagine waking up one day and realizing you're separated from your loved ones by a wall? That was the heartbreaking reality for millions of Berliners after the Berlin Wall was erected in 1961. The infamous structure divided East and West Berlin, symbolizing the bitter Cold War divide between the communist East and the capitalist West. Families were split, friendships were shattered, and escape attempts were often met with tragic consequences. The wall wasn't just a physical barrier, but an ideological one, creating a stark separation between two completely different ways of life. Why was it built? The East German government, backed by the Soviet Union, claimed the wall was to protect its citizens from Western fascists. In truth, it was meant to stop the mass exodus of East Germans fleeing to the West, seeking better opportunities and freedom. When the Berlin Wall finally fell in 1989, it marked the collapse of the Eastern Bloc and the end of communism in Eastern Europe. The wall's destruction was celebrated as a victory for unity, but the scars left behind are still felt in the city's landscape and culture today. The decision to build the Berlin Wall is one of the most controversial in urban history, shaping not just the city of Berlin, but the geopolitical world for decades. Its fall symbolizes the triumph of freedom, but the pain of separation is a memory that remains. Can you believe that a single project could change the landscape of an entire country? That's exactly what happened with China's Three Gorges Dam, one of the most controversial infrastructure projects in history. Completed in 2012, this colossal hydroelectric dam on the Yangtze River is the largest in the world. It generates massive amounts of electricity, which powers millions of homes and industries across China. Sounds like a win, right? But the reality is far more complicated. The dam's construction flooded over 1,300 towns and villages, displacing more than 1 million people. Whole communities were uprooted, their homes submerged underwater. Many of the displaced residents were promised new homes and compensation, but the relocation process was chaotic and poorly managed. Can you imagine having to leave everything behind just for the sake of progress? On top of that, the environmental impact has been severe. The dam has altered the local ecosystem, threatening wildlife and causing soil erosion. Sediment that would naturally replenish the river is now trapped behind the dam, leading to long-term ecological consequences. While the Three Gorges Dam provides significant economic benefits, including flood control and energy production, it has also sparked debates about the true cost of progress. Is it worth displacing so many lives and damaging the environment for the sake of development? That's the question China and the world will be grappling with for years to come. Pruitt-Igoe, a public housing project in St. Louis, Missouri, became one of the most infamous symbols of urban failure in American history. Built in the 1950s, Pruitt-Igoe was designed to provide modern, high-quality living spaces for low-income families. At the time, it was hailed as an innovative solution to the growing housing crisis. But things didn't go according to plan. The project quickly became plagued with crime, poverty, and mismanagement. Instead of becoming a vibrant community, this housing project turned into a symbol of urban decay. By the 1970s, conditions had worsened, with broken windows, rampant crime, and neglect by both the city and the federal government. Residents were trapped in a cycle of poverty, and the promise of upward mobility never materialized. In 1972, the decision was made to demolish it. Over the next few years, the towering blocks were reduced to rubble, signaling the end of the experiment in public housing. But the destruction raised critical questions about urban planning, poverty, and race relations in America. Could it have been saved? And what does its failure teach us about the challenges of building communities in cities today? Suppose you've lived for centuries on the same land, with your ancestors' spirits resting in the hills, and your way of life closely tied to the earth and nature. Now, imagine being forced off that land for the sake of progress. That's exactly what happened to the Maasai tribe in Tanzania, whose ancestral land was taken for the creation of national parks and conservation areas despite their deep connection to it. In the 1950s, the British colonial government pushed the Maasai off their land to create the Serengeti National Park. This decision was made under the guise of protecting wildlife and promoting tourism. But what was lost in the process? The Maasai, traditionally semi-nomadic herders, were no longer allowed to live and graze their cattle in the Serengeti. It wasn't just land that was taken, it was their heritage, their culture, and their livelihoods. This forced relocation caused economic hardships, emotional trauma, and cultural disintegration. The Maasai were moved to less fertile areas, often with limited resources and opportunities. While tourism flourished, the community was left on the margins. Today, the Maasai still struggle for their land and rights. The relocation remains a deeply controversial chapter in Tanzania's history, highlighting the complex intersection of conservation, colonialism, and indigenous rights. Could this have been handled differently? Or was it inevitable in the name of progress? Have you ever wondered why a country would suddenly build an entirely new capital city in the middle of nowhere? That's precisely what Myanmar did when they constructed Naypyidaw, a massive purpose-built capital in 2005. Why? Well, the reasons remain shrouded in mystery, and it's sparked controversy ever since. Located in the heart of the country, far from the bustling economic centers like Yangon, Naypyidaw was chosen as Myanmar's new capital by the military government. The decision was made in secret, and the move shocked citizens and international observers alike. What's even more bizarre is that the city was constructed almost overnight, complete with wide, empty roads, grandiose government buildings, and even a zoo, but with very few people living there. This huge undertaking cost billions of dollars, but questionings linger about whether it was really necessary or if it was simply a strategic power play by the military junta to distance itself from the public. Critics argue that its lavish project drained resources that could have been used for much-needed development in the rest of the country. Today, Naypyidaw remains a ghost town of sorts, impressive in scale, but lacking the life and energy of a thriving capital. Was this a move to enhance Myanmar's future, or just another symbol of its military rulers' thirst for control and isolation? In the 1960s, the Canadian government decided to bulldoze Africville, displacing its residents and erasing an important piece of history. Africville was founded in the 1800s by Black Nova Scotians, many of whom were descendants of freed slaves. Despite facing systemic racism and neglect, the community thrived, with a deep sense of pride and self-sufficiency. But by the 1960s, the city of Halifax had other plans. Officials deemed Africville a blight on the city and decided to demolish it to make room for industrial development. The residents were promised better housing and compensation, but many were left without adequate support or relocation assistance. The demolition of Africville is seen as one of the most tragic examples of urban renewal gone wrong, as it not only destroyed the community, but also displaced generations of families. The loss of Africville is still felt today, as its cultural significance and the harm done to its residents remain a dark chapter in Canada's history. Can you even believe this happened? It's a painful reminder of how progress can sometimes come at the expense of the very people it's supposed to help. The creation of Central Park in New York City was a groundbreaking urban planning project that transformed a chaotic, overcrowded area into one of the world's most famous green spaces. But behind its lush landscapes and serene ponds lies a controversial history. In the 1850s, the idea of turning a swath of land into a public park seemed like an innovative move for the city. However, the way it was executed raised significant issues. To make way for the park, the city forcibly removed thousands of residents from their homes in the crowded neighborhoods of Seneca Village, a thriving African-American community. The park's construction led to the destruction of the community, displacing families who had lived there for decades. Despite this, the idea of creating a massive public park that would serve as an oasis for the city's growing population gained widespread support. While Central Park is now celebrated as a beautiful urban retreat, the cost of its creation remains a dark chapter in the city's history. The displaced families received no compensation or adequate relocation assistance, and the erasure of Seneca Village is often overlooked in discussions about the park's development. Central Park's creation serves as a reminder that even the most beloved landmarks can have controversial origins, where the push for progress often comes at the expense of vulnerable communities. Which of these controversial decisions do you think had the biggest impact? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories about cities and history.